So today I'm here to present to you kind of my thoughts on using the information from Chapter 5 and applying it to the Hockaday Responders case study. So the first question was to discuss what appears to be the differing motivations for virtual team members. There appear to be a number of differing motivations for virtual team members. Some work in a more technological type of position, such as Brian and Mark. Ruggiero and Jill both were seeking change to the customer support area. The employees had been previously pleased with a self-directed team structure that they had employed 4 years in the past. Jill and Ruggiero then went to some of the senior employees, Jerry, Barb, Gertie, and Mary, and they believed that the virtual team could work. There were some others that didn't agree, but they didn't say who that was in the actual case study. So they selected the very best in each regional center. They did a rotational leadership style, but Mary was the leader through most of the actual crisis events that took place in the case. And Mary, because of the first experience, kind of became a reluctant leader. Then you had Francois, who seemed only to kind of care about himself, and eventually he ended up not being a part of the team toward the end of the case study. Martin, Kim, and Brian, when they're discussing the actual setup of the virtual team structure, had reservations about working with unfamiliar customers. So that's kind of like the overall motivations that I picked up from the case study. The next question asks us to describe LMX, which is Leader Member Exchange, found on page 5.51 in our textbook. So basically, the leader membership exchange theory says that leaders have limited time and resources, and they share both their personal and positional resources differently with their employees, based on their relationships, whether they're in-group or out-group orientated. Because this group spent very little time in face-to-face interaction, I would say that most would consider each other out-group, as discussed on page 5.5.1. The leader-member exchange requires a high-functioning leader, and because they had rotational leadership, this would be difficult to establish. Even though Ruggiero kind of seems like he was the leader overall, he didn't spend a lot of time with the team. They weren't all located in one area. So I wouldn't imagine that he would have had a lot of personal or positional resources to kind of share with the team. It seemed like the only time that Ruggiero and Jill got involved was when there was the major crisis event that happened. The next question asks us to describe how peer relationships might be improved for the virtual team. So one of the biggest things, and kind of as I said before, more face-to-face meetings. And when you can't meet face-to-face, using a media-rich channel as possible when interacting with one another. So instead of sending an email, maybe setting up a teleconference. And they should actually be having some kind of teleconference meeting probably once a month to just make sure that everybody's on the same page. Some of the other things that they could consider doing is having team building exercises where they meet as a group at a retreat once per year if possible. And there's a number of different leadership courses and team building experiences that you can buy as a corporation. I've actually had the opportunity to participate in some when I was a national officer for a student organization. They have this camp out in Ohio that we went to where we did a variety of different exercises to kind of help us work together as a team. So they could consider doing something like that. Another thing that I kind of found interesting about the case, although they spend some time talking about the problems, they don't really celebrate their successes. And so I feel like if they celebrated their successes a little more as a team, that might also help them to feel more of that in-group association with one another. And then lastly, another suggestion is they could have a skill set review. And kind of what I mean is that everybody sits down and explains what it is that they do and what they bring to the team and what kind of skills the team can expect from their members. It's a good way to kind of get everybody on the same page and let everybody know who's good at what. Because although you might work as the tech guy, you might be really good at something else, but your teammates might not have that information. And so maybe to sit down and have like a skills review session so that everybody's on the same page. The next question is asking us to discuss how technology influences the interpersonal relationships on the virtual team. So technology plays a huge role in the virtual team setting. As somebody who's worked on a virtual team, I can actually personally attest to that. Some of the things that the team can do to help is to always use the most media-rich channel available when communicating and spending time together in person on a regular basis. Even as a national officer, when travel's really expensive and everybody was located all over the country, we got together 3 times in the whole year that we were serving as national officers. So we did a week-long training in Columbus, Ohio, and then we went in January to the site of our actual National Leadership Conference, and we did another week-long training there and kind of planned everything out. And then, of course, we met when it was time for the actual leadership conference. So I feel like if this virtual team had more regular meetings, they would probably have that in-group association with one another. They might feel more connected. I remember reading in the case study that when they did one of the surveys towards the end, that they felt more connected with the people at the regional center than they did with one another. And so some of the ways to kind of help with that would be to have more regular person-to-person, face-to-face interaction. And then lastly, it says, are there cultural influences in the virtual team which need to be understood? As this team is based in several different global locations, there are many cultural differences between them. One thing that they could do to understand one another better is to gather regularly in person to get to know one another better, and they could make up some fun games to learn about one another's different cultural backgrounds. You know, if you have somebody from Germany, maybe they could talk about, 10 interesting facts about Germany. Just some things to kind of help the team get to understand where the other team members are coming from and kind of what cultural values they hold, so that it's not a surprise when, somebody feels like everybody should be working together, but the American team members are kind of a little more individualistic rather than collectivistic, things like that. That would make a big difference for this team. And so those are my thoughts on our case study this week. I hope you're all having a nice week, and I'll see you next time.